Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're grabbing our wildest pair of sunglasses and diving headfirst into just the extraordinary transformation of one of the planet's greatest musical icons, Elton John.
It's an amazing story because when you look at the narrative now, it's all gold records, right?
Yeah.
A net worth of, $650 million, knighthood, one of the biggest tours in history.
Absolutely.
But that glossy ending, it really hides a period of just staggering chaos.
And that contrast, that's the real hook here. We're talking about the man who, at his peak in the late 70s and 80s, was living in such acute emotional isolation.
Yeah.
He's downing a bottle of vodka a day, abusing cocaine, suffering from bulimia. I mean, he was completely falling apart behind the scenes, but all the world saw was the superstar.
He was almost consumed by it all. The side effects of fame, the excess, the emptiness, and this disastrous idea that money could somehow fill that spiritual void.
Right.
The sources we have, from his own memoirs to court filings about his finances, they track this incredible arc.
So that's our mission today. We want to understand that pivot point. This deep dive goes way beyond the glitz and the Grammys to explore the emotional resurrection, the huge financial shifts, and the radical daily habits that didn't just save his life. They forged this lasting, powerful legacy.
We're tracking that moment that entertainers stopped being driven by impulse and instead committed to being driven by intention. It's the story of how he stopped using money as anesthesia.
And started using it as a tool?
Exactly. A tool for intentional rebuilding.
Okay, let's unpack that idea, financial anesthesia, because I think it's shockingly relatable, even if you're not a global superstar. The scale of his financial recklessness in the 80s is almost fictional.
It is genuinely stunning. I mean, if you look at the court records that surfaced around 2000, they showed that Elton John spent over 30 million pounds.
30 million.
Which was roughly 50 million US dollars at the time. And get this, in less than 2 years.
Wait. So you're saying on average he was spending over $2 million a month?
Every single month for 24 months straight.
How do you physically do that? Was there just zero oversight?
Well, the sources say he just refused oversight. He had this profound fear of saying no to himself, to others. So he let this culture of just catastrophic spending flourish all around him.
He didn't want to look at the bills?
He didn't want to look at the bills because looking at the numbers would force him to look at the emptiness they were trying to hide.
And the details are the most jarring part.
Yeah.
We're talking about spending, what was it, $293,000 on flowers.
On flowers in under 9 months.
That's a house. What did he say about that?
And this gets right to the heart of the why. It wasn't an investment. It wasn't even a luxury. It was just raw emotional filler. He confessed that the flowers, which he bought constantly in these huge arrangements, they made me feel less empty. He was literally using beautiful things to try and mask this acute isolation he was feeling.
That is the ultimate paradox of hyperconsumption, isn't it? The more you consume, the emptier you feel. So even as his records were soaring, his financial literacy was just plummeting.
Precisely. His fame was exploding, but his fortune was actively being put at risk because he was using money to escape his reality, not to build a secure foundation within it.
The core lesson there, which he learned the really hard way, is that money won't save you from yourself.
Not at all.
So when does the pivot happen? What did that dramatic financial shift actually look like?
The turning point didn't really happen until the late 90s, after he got clean and started dealing with all that underlying emotional chaos. He had to restructure his entire relationship with money, and operationally that meant bringing in a completely new team.
New advisors.
People who didn't work for him during the wild years, people who could say no.
So what does that look like in practice?
Yeah.
Separating emotions from financial decisions. Did you have like a veto system?
He essentially surrendered control to experts. Their job was to say no, regardless of his status or his mood. He started focusing on long-term value, on appreciating assets, real estate, and most importantly, retaining control over his music rights.
Which brings us right to our next section, the business of immortality.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to make millions, but building a $650 million empire that can sustain you for decades, that takes a different kind of genius.
Absolutely. Elton John's staying power isn't just because he's a great performer. It's because he diversified his income and, crucially, he maintained ownership.
And when you look at the evidence for that diversification, I mean, the 50-plus top 40 hits are just the start.
Just the start. Then you have the stage musicals like The Lion King, which is just a perpetual cash machine.
And the biopic, Rocket Man, which grossed almost $200 million. And then the farewell tour.
That tour. It became the highest-grossing tour of all time. We're talking over $939 million for an artist in his 70s.
Just staggering.
But the real genius, the wealth engine behind all of it, is ownership.
Okay, break that down for us. Why is ownership, especially publishing rights, so important for wealth creation?
So when you write a song, you typically own two things. The recording, which is the master, and the composition, the publishing. The composition rights control how the music gets used.
In films, TV, ads.
Exactly. Commercials, cover versions, samples. And because Elton co-wrote his entire catalog with Bernie Taupin, he retained and protected these incredibly lucrative publishing revenues.
So he wasn't just relying on album sales or Spotify streams, which can, fluctuate like crazy. He secured this passive, perpetual income stream.
That's it. It pays every single time someone licenses Tiny Dancer for a movie. And that revenue keeps flowing long after he stops touring. His whole philosophy shifted from fame is temporary to ownership of my work is forever.
Which is so smart. It ensured the money kept coming in, letting him outperform younger stars who often sign away that control for a bigger check up front.
But as you said, none of this financial clarity, none of this empire building could have happened without the really deep internal work.
Right. We have to talk about the collapse that came before the recovery.
Yeah.
So let's detail that crisis point. It's 1990. Spiraling addiction, cocaine, alcohol, bulimia. He has a near overdose. What was it that finally forced the change?
It wasn't the realization that he was dying, which is so strange. It was seeing profound suffering outside of himself. He had visited Ryan White, the young man who got AIDS from a blood transfusion.
And he saw the stigma, the isolation Ryan faced.
Exactly. And then shortly after, he saw another young man in Indianapolis dying of AIDS, completely alone.
He describes that moment as something inside him just snapping. It wasn't his own fear of death that did it. It was being so close to someone else's pain.
Correct. He realized if he didn't check into rehab right then, he would be the one dying alone, having wasted everything. So he committed to getting clean, and that meant a radical reinvention of his daily life.
And what's so fascinating is that the sources all emphasize his sobriety wasn't built on willpower. It was built on implementing a radical routine.
A complete 180-degree reversal of the 80s chaos. His life is now just governed by structure. He wakes up early, 6 a.m.
Wow.
He maintains a clean, mostly plant-based diet. He meditates. He journals daily to process stress without, reaching for an external fix.
He built a fortress around his talent. I find the digital isolation part so telling. He avoids social media, doesn't use a smartphone. He has assistants handle emails and texts.
That's a very conscious decision.
It's a way to block out the chaos, the negativity, the triggers.
It's his defense mechanism. He's fiercely protecting his mental energy. And on top of that, he attends 12-step meetings even when he's touring the world. His evenings are quiet, he knows what chaos costs, and he just refuses to pay that price again.
The core insight here is so critical for anyone, really. Success doesn't just depend on talent, it depends on the rituals that protect that talent.
You need the talent to rise, but you need the structure, the guardrails to sustain it for decades.
But sobriety was only the foundation. He needed meaning. And he found it, not back in the spotlight, but in the serious work of advocacy.
That's where the purpose comes in. He said after getting clean, he felt the ground shift when he started visiting young AIDS patients. That moment led directly to starting the Elton John AIDS Foundation in 1992.
And this was no celebrity vanity project. That foundation has raised and distributed over $600 million.
In more than 55 countries, it funds everything from treatment access to policy reform.
And the authenticity is key. He didn't just write a check. He visited patients, he fought the stigma directly, and he centered his life around these values.
His business choices became values-driven. He avoided sponsorships that didn't align with his humanitarian work. He truly lived that idea that...
What was it? The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. It's connection. He connected to people, to pain, and to a purpose that was way bigger than selling records.
And that integrity led to a different kind of power, a quieter influence. He went from needing visibility to commanding this profound respect. It's why he was knighted in 1998 and later promoted to the Order of the Companions of Honor.
He also became this incredibly credible voice for LGBTQ+ rights, often when it was commercially risky to do so.
He was just unapologetically himself. He showed immense courage using his fame to fight stigma, not just enjoy its perks. He had a rule for himself.
I think I know the one.
If I lose fans because of who I love, they were never really mine to begin with.
That is just a masterclass in integrity. It shows that true power doesn't need to shout. It commands respect just by standing authentically behind your values.
And when you connect that back to his business, you see a man who built a legacy on moral force, which paradoxically made his commercial empire even stronger.
Which brings us to the final and maybe the most reflective decision of all, walking away. In a culture that demands constant relevance, Elton John did the unthinkable. He quit.
At the absolute peak of his power.
Right. The farewell tour was a massive success. But the money, as we've established, was secondary. The message was everything.
He didn't want to die under the stage lights. He wanted to live. He wanted to be present.
Present for his two young sons, Zachary and Elijah, and his partner, David Furnish. It was this conscious choice to go from public icon to private father.
His quote from the very last show in Stockholm, it just sums up the entire journey. He said, "I've had enough applause to last 10 lifetimes. Now I want to hear the sound of my children's laughter."
It wasn't retirement from exhaustion or irrelevance. It was a powerful choice to just define what enough meant to him.
Exactly. It was a declaration that he was, finally, more than his career. It takes strength to rise, but it takes profound wisdom to walk away while you're still on fire. He curated his legacy by exiting on his own terms, glowing, not fading.
So if we synthesize this whole arc, Elton John's story isn't just about musical genius. It's a powerful narrative about the willingness to start over.
And to rebuild not from the outside in with, hundreds of thousands of dollars in flowers, but from the inside out, through routine, discipline, and purpose.
He didn't just survive addiction. He transcended it by choosing truth over image and enough over more. His legacy shows you don't have to be perfect to become unforgettable. You just have to be brave enough to finally come home to yourself.
And this raises, I think, a really important question for you, the listener, based on everything we've covered. What part of your life is still desperately searching for the spotlight, when what you really need is peace and internal structure?
Your comeback or your final act doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be absolutely undeniably real. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.